Hello, and welcome to another Flashpoint Q&A. I wonder if we have anything to talk about today, Thorin, Anders, and Semmler. Gentlemen, I can't think of any news that might have been broken this morning that we might be expected to talk about on our lovely Q&A this afternoon.
Well, the funny thing is, people, as usual, will get distracted by the headline and miss what is actually a blockbuster, world-changing piece of information, which is that the CSPPA are claiming to own intellectual property rights to players within the CSPPA. By the way, that would need a very strong contract that put all this on paper. That's a game changer. That's the entire industry just torn apart right there. Like the entire fabric of what it meant to have an esports team, what it meant to be a player, what a player association would represent. Like this is basically groundbreaking. Like this is like, where were you when JFK was shot? Like it's one of those moments, guys. So, buckle in. Buckle in.
Yeah.
Well,
only a tiny bit of sarcasm mixed in there. I don't know if people caught any of that. I didn't want to overegg the pudding, Semmler.
So to introduce our guests, we have Purple Anders and his psychedelic background. Just that corner might be on some form of hallucinogen right now, but I'm enjoying it. How's it going, Purple Anders?
I'm doing real well. I'm in the simulation, obviously, so I'm enjoying myself quite a bit. I was expecting like a mellow kind of it, like I wasn't expecting anything like this. It's already off to a wild start.
Yeah, he just wanted to sit in his room with his black lights and tapestries and chill out. Well, I'm sorry, it's not going to be that kind of day. All right, and of course, birthday boy Semmler. Did you have a happy birthday? You're wearing your Flashpoint shirt. You're all themed up for the Q&A.
What's up? Got to represent, right? But yeah, wonderful birthday. It was lovely. Had a nice day casting some CS with Anders, and then had a nice barbecue with my wife. We made a tomahawk steak. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It was great. Life is good.
How's the quality of steak in Sweden?
Top notch. And right now I'm like trying to figure out, I've got some friends down south who are close to some farmers, and I'm trying to figure out how to source meat directly, directly.
There you go.
So close. Yeah. No,
That's
it's going to be, that's the goal right now. That's the goal. But the meat is top.
Get in before that part.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll see you. All right. Still.
Okay, guys. Well, as you know, lovely Twitch chat, we are transparent here at Flashpoint. So you can ask us questions about the letter that was talked about by Decay today. Needless to say that let's begin this conversation by discussing the fact that we think that the CSPPA and the players having their own association is very good, and we would like to work with them on many things.
He means Flashpoint, not the people in this call. He just means he's using like we in a general sense. Just in case there's any confusion, because I think people know what I feel about them, and it's very different from that. But keep going, Monty.
We'll get to Thorin's individual opinion that does not represent the collective opinion of Flashpoint in a minute. Thorin is free, as are everyone here, to share their individual opinions. However, that said, we would like to work with the CSPPA as Flashpoint, but they need to fulfill the obligations. And I'm going to kick off this conversation by discussing the necessity of the player team rankings, right? So one of the most important things for us as a tournament organizer is that we do not want to be beholden to the HLTV or the ESL team rankings for determining which teams are the best. There are certain implicit biases in these rankings. One of the things that the players themselves have been concerned with is that the rankings like HLTV are weighted according to frequency of events that these teams participate in. Now, in a world where the players themselves do not want to be forced to participate in as many events because of stress and burnout and these other related issues, we need a ranking system to operate off of for our teams. Because remember, in Flashpoint, we fine our partner teams who are not within the top 20 of those rankings. So we need them to provide us a system of ranking these teams that is more in line with their own concerns about player burnout, so that we can use this independent ranking in order to assess fines and to seed our teams in Flashpoint events. I would really like them to do this. And we would really like them to do this as a whole. It's very important, but this is something that so far they have dropped the ball on, which is something they said they would do. So please do it. for the sake of your players and for the sake of us as a tournament organizer so that we can operate ourselves accordingly.
I have a little something to say on this topic, which is like, as a person, I'm not at all against using HLTV's rankings. Actually, I think right now it's probably the most fair ranking system,
which we are using, by the way, right now.
But the point is, it was never me that this was an issue with. In fact, all the issues in that letter to CSPPA are things that, like, some of those things are things that Flashpoint doesn't need CSPPA to do. Some of those things we could just do them ourselves. The point is to actively engage with the premise of CSPPA, which is to be an association for the players so that they can have a say in what happens. So in the case of this player ranking, I don't give a monkeys whether it's the HLTV one or this new one created now. But in this scenario, as you pointed out there, it's the players that would benefit from having a different ranking system, because the basic problem right now is that because in tennis, right, the ATP, that tour obviously doesn't care about the players. Like, the players have their own unions, they have to battle back on points there. So the current ranking system that HLTV uses is the same as the ATP one. If you are like X points below number one in the world rankings in tennis, and you only have to gain, say, a small amount, you can choose to cynically attend a small tournament that will not feature the top 10 players in the world, win the tournament, and you will be number one in the rankings. That has always been a factor that could exist. It actually, at the moment, isn't exercised because most of the top players in tennis are too old. Like, Roger Federer and Nadal are like years away from retiring. So they explicitly do what CS players would want to do now, which is pick and choose the big events that really define your career and try and win those. But if there was some young guy got to number 5 in the rankings and he ever wanted to get 1 or 2 spots for free, he could just say, right, I'm going to go to every tournament for the next 3 months. And the point is, players don't want that in CS, because it doesn't matter if they say no to the tournament. If the other person overtakes them in the rankings by just playing more events, they would consider that bad. So you notice how the people who would benefit the most from these rankings are the players in the CSPPA who then play in Flashpoint and other tournaments. So I would just say the onus is on them. Hopefully they would do it for their own membership, because it doesn't actually benefit Flashpoint beyond just having, a seal of approval of CSPPA. That's cool, but doesn't, like, we don't objectively need them to do these things logistically. It's just we're trying to engage them, like I say, for the premise of what they were there for, as a body.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's the whole thing is that a lot of these issues, you can see that there are very good faith reasons why Flashpoint would be engaging this. So I'm the commissioner of this league. Let me tell you, do I need you to necessarily create a ranking system? I can do that myself, right? We can do that as an organization. Do we have to get input from you for the rules? No, but it's good that the players all understand are on board, and we want to involve the players as part of this process in creating rules. However, there have been numerous problems with creating rules. The proposed rules were sent to the players 6 weeks in advance of the start of the tournament, and they weren't actually... The CSPPA did not comment on them until we were in playoffs. Now, this resulted in situations, especially after we had to go remote, where players were late, but we had no punishment mechanism for the broadcast not starting on time because these rules hadn't been ratified by the CSPPA. These are issues, and we want to be collaborative on them, but it is affecting our ability to operate this tournament structure when they are not communicating with us, or they are not fulfilling the obligations that are set forth. So these are the issues that we're attempting to rectify right now, and there is still, a desire to work with the CSPPA on these issues, but we need to start seeing movement on a variety of these topics. So,
have they given any words why it took 6 weeks? I'm just confused.
I mean, technically, Anders, they didn't even ever reply to that. Like, that's probably the stupidest part about their instant response. Their response said that all these allegations were baseless. So apparently, even the part about the monitor sponsorship, that was just a lie as well, because they said so. So, like, the people, it's like Lena drafting this or something. Like, have you ever thought of maybe sending it to like an actual legal team that understands these things maybe one day used in a court of law? Like, have you ever even seen a police procedural show when someone got arrested? Like, start at square one. I'd just say, also, I want to know right now, like, You'll appreciate this, Anders. Like, which one of the sliders alternate universes are we in? Are we in the one again where Sir Scoots is in the CSPPA, or is this the one where he's not in it? Like, I keep forgetting because I keep shifting between the universes, Anders, and so day to day it can change me. So I'm never quite sure where I stand myself. You know, is this one of the ones where dinosaurs still exist, or is that?
Maybe
you
it's
have
just,
the reference. Though.
It's Schrodinger's Scoots, where he's both in and out of the CSPPA at the same time.
You know, not that it has a direct relevance to this, but I remember back when we put together Room on Fire, Semmler, we had this discussion about, you know, trying to create like a caster union, and obviously having to go through the process of understanding the difference between a union and a, you know, and a talent agency or any normal company. And I guess it is vital, obviously, being, you know, if you decide to be more of a union, then that comes with certain responsibilities, right?
That's the reason why we went for a corporation in the end.
Yeah.
Because it was just going to be way too complicated to put together a union. And also, yeah, it's just, it wasn't feasible. Didn't make any sense to have that work that way at the time.
Or at the very least,
I'm curious. Like, I really like how vague this is, the response. You know, this is just pure lawyer speak, right? Where it's just like, you know, to be used by the CSPPA to further and protect the interests of professional CSGO players in accordance with the Articles of Association, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, so are the players getting a cut of the money, or is it just going to be going to pay for this lawyer's hourly rate? Like, what's going on here with this money anyway? You know, why does the CSPPA need $165,000?
Well, I think that if they were, you know, I think there are reasons, right?
Sure.
Including like,
you know, I'm always skeptical. So like, to me, it's like, where's this money going? Let me does it get divided amongst all the players? You know, like what's going on there?
Let me tell you like what I would use some of this money for if I were them. So, for example, with the ranking system, it is unlikely that the CSPPA employs anyone who is a professional statistician, like a PhD level data scientist, who is going to be able to create a robust mathematical formula. So a lot of that money would be hiring somebody independently and using your players and your experts and potentially paying them consulting fees as well to explain to this person what the current setup of the CSGO cycle is, what the goals of a new ranking system would be, and then tweaking that so it makes sense. Now, that could be quite expensive to undertake, for example, right?
Fair enough.
So there's a certain use of that money that could be undertaken because you're having to hire real academic experts in order to do a good job of having that. It's the same thing that, for example, when we made the Flashpoint format, one of the things that I did was I leaned on Cloud9's data science team and a PhD data scientist that is a full-time employee of Cloud9 in order to develop the playoff point system. And Thorin was part of that process as well, where we were looking at various scenarios of, you know, to what degree do we weight first place versus second place in terms of points, and what are the actual potential outcomes of that situation so we don't have ties? How much do we want to weight each place and have the value of getting first place versus fourth place? These were all considerations that we had that we needed somebody, you know, super good at that kind of math to do, because that's not me. I don't have a doctorate in doing that. So that's something that, you know, potentially this money could be used for, as an example.
Fair enough.
All right, let's get to some points. Anybody else have anything to say on this topic that is not directly a result of a question that we're going to have? There's a lot to discuss. There's a lot to discuss.
I'm still reading the freaking article because I just sat down and all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's this massive thing that you have to go over and actually pay attention while you read too, just so you can actually understand what the hell's going on here. And, you know, of course, once again, shout out to Decay for coming up with the goods and putting together, you know, this excellent work. So,
I think you did a good job of explaining it point by point. So let's see here. Let's ask. Question about the fines for lower rank. Will they be dealt between season or just during the 4 to 5 months a year of Flashpoint? That's an ongoing negotiation. Now, it became more complicated due to the coronavirus pandemic. Assessing fines against teams that aren't playing LAN and have restrictions, you know, some are playing with higher ping. No one's playing on LAN. It's very difficult to gauge performance right now. So that's something that's a process that is still ongoing. Here's a nice softball question for everybody. How would you guys start if you wanted to get into casting or even esports in general? Let's just say casting. So I'm going to tweak this question because what we did to get into casting is not necessarily possible anymore because it was a very different time. Let's have a hypothetical. If you wanted to get into casting today, what would you do?
Ooh, I always have like a meme version of this answer, but I think there's like a grain of truth in it. But it goes something like try and just screw up everything else in your life first, because chances are that the things that like the temptation to quit when things aren't working out and all you're reading is stupid criticism on the HLTV forum on Reddit or whatever is gonna be pretty overpowering. So it really helps if you've gone all in on it. Like Semmler, you moved to Sweden to live with a bunch of maniacs in a house out of the woods.
And 12 cats.
And 12 cats. And I had to trash like 3 different university degrees along the way to try and get. So I think there's some truth to it. Like I think that definitely helps. Now it's true what Monty is saying. Like one of the issues, at least in Counter-Strike, right, things used to be way more open, so that you could just go and cast for whatever game you wanted. You didn't have to worry about whether or not the tournament organizer would be locking the IP and whether or not you could get access to any live games and all the rest of it.
It's a totally different time.
Yeah, so there's some part where like stepping on the lowest rung of the ladder right now could be, I think, a little bit more tricky. But I mean, I think the more serious answer is I have to steal from Christopher Hitchens, which is something like you almost have to feel like you can't do anything else, which was his answer to why people should start writing. And I think that makes sense. Like that's how I know I had to do. Like I tried it one time on Twitch, and I was like, this is actually what I want to do, and I just decided that evening that like I'm quitting my 5th university degree or whatever it is. Like I'm done. I just want to do this. So
I agree. I think like in entertainment.
Point now, Anders does live in Denmark, so 5 university degrees doesn't mean he's sitting on like $500,000 worth of student debt. It's covered by the state, right?
He probably also has some sweet unemployment, so that he can actually start his esports career. Coast there for a little bit on the government dime, so that he's not like literally homeless.
Socialism.
You just have to take a minimum in credits, as far as I know, and you can still maintain all your student benefits and everything as well. Student housing. I'm pretty sure I know one commentator who's used that hack. So,
so with that said, just in general, guys, in entertainment, if you're not all in on entertainment, you're just going to get owned by somebody who is all in. Period. Like that's just how the industry works. There's always going to be somebody out there who is willing to take more risks in order to make it happen. So I guess for me, I just love doing it, and I never really thought about it being a professional career. So I feel like if your goal is I want to be a professional caster and make a living off of it, you've already failed in my mind. Because if you're not enjoying the process, you sure as hell are not going to enjoy the insane grind that it takes to get to that position. So you can't really, in my opinion, you really just can't even have that end goal in your mind. It has to be about the work on a day-to-day basis. Because if you're not loving that for its own sake, you're just fucked. Like you will never make it. You will never actually be able to put the amount of time into it that is necessary. And frankly, the amount of thankless hours that you have doing all of this stuff for seemingly no reward. I did stuff in esports for 8 years before I got a full-time job, and I just kept doing it. So the other thing I would say is if you want to be a commentator, a very smart thing to do that no one else gives this advice is I would take singing or acting or speaking lessons, because the delivery of the information and the ability to use your voice is something that most people who are nerds don't really think about or look at. I know many people, including myself, I have 15 years of acting background and being trained to speak. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I can say infinity smart things, but if you don't like the way that I say them in terms of pacing, delivery, and tone, then it doesn't matter what I say. That is incredibly important.
I've got some practical advice I'd give people. Think of any field in normal life that's incredibly competitive to get into, like some sort of like a super duper like job that you're going to get when you leave university. Sometimes to even get into very exclusive universities where they only take, 500 students. And so everyone applying has all A's. Like that alone isn't going to get you through the door having the A grade. What you do is you build your resume. So what you should do is don't imagine you're going to jump in and do DreamHack Open. You aren't. You're never going to go from 0 to DreamHack Open. And I'm saying DreamHack Open because most people consider that firmly in the tier 2. So what you want to do is you want to, before you even attempt to go to the DreamHack Open level, pad your resume as much as you can. Go and do any free open competition. Go even do games you don't even work on right now. You're going to make mistakes, but no one's going to be watching. It's in a different game. It's not in your main game. So if Counter-Strike's your main game, I can tell you the people who complain the most are the people who I'd say are at tier 4, which is mainly, I mean, now everything's online, but back then was only online games, and you basically fill the dead shift when it's like, you know, online qualifier for ECS or online qualifier for IEM Sydney, and it's the game at 4 in the morning and any local time. If you do those games, some of those games would pay like $5 per game. So the actual real casters are already trying to get away from that. They don't want to do that. As soon as they're out of that world, they're out. So the point is, go and do that. It's unglamorous, but again, it means you get to say ESL qualifier on your resume. You get to say, I did a small LAN. Like, all these things help you as you go each, like, rung up the ladder, I'd say. So basically, don't be too egotistical to think that because you one day want to be like the top caster, that you won't do the bottom things. I'd say generally in any business, by the way, great way to learn the business is start at the bottom for the free jobs, do a bunch of those, and learn as you go up. It's free experience.
I would build on that. There was a bit of a discussion going on Twitter not too long ago about whether or not you should be working for free in esports at the beginning. And I'm sitting there just going like, dude, I paid out the nose, like, work for free. I sunk all my money into it. Like, what are you talking about? Getting a job that pays you money when you want to start in a new industry? Like, get out of here with that entitlement. You know, the whole thing is you do what you got to do to stick in it. And if the whole thing is just to get experience, like Duncan's saying, right? You want to build your resume, you want to build your experience, and you're willing to take any gig possible to further that goal. And whether that's even just working in the back end, maybe you're just helping an esports team out with some social media stuff or whatever, like anything to get your foot in the door, and paid or not, whatever. If that's what you want to do, you're going to do it. You'll work another job to pay the rent, right? You'll do something else. Like, I was working a job and I would intentionally wake up at 5 in the morning every morning so that I could get out of work early enough to get home and cast European matches for BLC. So it's stuff like that. You're just going to shift it around and do whatever you need to do to get in there. And so for the people who seem to come in thinking like, oh, I shouldn't be working for free, obviously I should be making at least minimum wage. There's your first problem. You know, don't go in with any expectations. If you hit that and you manage to get a job paying right out the gates, well, good job. You found the unicorn. You know what I mean? Like, fantastic. Good on you. But for everybody, I mean, for the vast majority of people, you're just going to have to grind a bit.
Yeah, by the way, that's even good advice, the idea that if you get in another job, that could lead to, because here's the thing, right? If you're part of like a crew of people who cast, or you're another staff member, one day there's going to be a game where they're short of a person and they can't get someone last minute. And you can say, I would like to do that. You know, I actually do this temporarily on the side myself. It's a bit like scenario that I once thought was going to happen to me. You're going to love this anecdote. So I was in Finland, let's say about, I think it was like 2011 or something. I went to Finland to see Nartu and to see Lurpes, people who are friends of mine from Finland. And when we were there, right, they were like going to meet up and go to like some really local LAN and just play as like a mixed team. And so that you can see where this story's going. So they go like, this guy couldn't come, and I'm just sat there, right? And then they go, so we need a 5th for this LAN. And by the way, this is all like ex-pros, all like legendary people. But even so, it's like a small LAN we're going to. Like, I could definitely play it. And then they were just going, we're going to need another 5th though. And I'm just sat there like, I don't want to say it, but I'm sort of like, you know, I play CS quite a lot myself. And then they just go, there's no one though. So what about your cousin? Would he be available? They start calling people up, right, who haven't even played CS in years, going like, can you come on? I can't come again. And then they're just going, yeah, well, you know, I mean, in an emergency, I could jump in. And then they were just like not even registering that, just going like, I think maybe, I had an old friend who used to live like 5 years ago. I haven't spoken, and then eventually they just got some other guy. And so here's the thing: even though, by the way, the whole time, obviously inside, I was just being roasted alive, like why? But the best part is, here's the good news. Don't worry. At the tournament, even though they had 4 ex-pros, they got 16-0 to completely embarrassed. I stood behind them, trying my hardest to suppress a smile, like. That's guys. Yep. And part of me was just thinking, probably dodged a bullet on that one. Imagine if I had seen this on my record. Anyway, that's the story.
Can I just give a quick reply? Because Mike the SSN in the chat was saying that there's like a level of sort of survivorship bias. Like, obviously,
of course there is.
I mean, that's I was going to say that's definitely true. Like, and I often say whenever I have this conversation with people who ask me, you know, outside of a podcast, I tend to say to people like, yeah, there is an element of like being at the right place at the right time and just sort of getting lucky. I mean, that's definitely true for me with Counter-Strike. Like, it's not that I didn't put in a lot of work, but you know, Counter-Strike was a game that like in the beginning of Global Offensive, like most of the people who were sort of tier 1 in other games that could have, come in to try and take over the space didn't think that Counter-Strike would be anything. Like they just thought it was a shit game, and they didn't want to be, anywhere near it for the beginning of it. So, like that was just, I mean, I couldn't have seen that. It wasn't like I was some genius that figured that out early on. That just happened. And I mean, like, and actually what's really interesting, you see that attempted behavior replicated across other games right now. Whenever a new game comes out, you see all these people sort of move over into it, but I think it's hard to do that. Like no one knows where that's going to happen, right? But I think just to say that, yeah, of course there's some survivorship bias, but there is, I think it's fair enough to say, yeah, there's also an element of saying sometimes you just have to be in the right place, and when you put in that work.
I just appreciate that feedback. Like, how would you guys recommend that I make it in the industry? Well, here's how I do it. Well, you're just telling us how you survive.
Yeah, because you just made it. It's like, all right,
well, I guess the universe is entirely arbitrary and random,
that sort of
and
shit.
that we
Those
have
are the people
no
who fail anyway. At anything, they're just like, oh, but it won't work because of this reason. Well, hold on, let me tell you about how you can actually but that can obviously not work because of this.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing about entertainment, guys. Sometimes it just doesn't work for reasons that are outside of your control. 100% true. 100% true. Like that is, not everybody gets to be a movie star. That's just how it works. For every one movie star, there are many, many, many thousands of people who are trying to be movie stars. For every NBA star, there's thousands and thousands of people who are not playing in the NBA who play college ball. You know what I mean? So, sure. Take whatever bias you want, but if you're just going to say that, then don't ask for advice, because any advice we give is useless.
Wait a minute. You guys are going to talk about how people shouldn't have to work for free in the industry. What about all those college athletes working for free? Yeah. How dare you? How dare you? Shame on you.
And by the way, the NCAA is a much bigger business than the entirety of the esports business by a large, large, large margin. So we're just a small fish.
They should just get their own player association. You just make up any kind of demands you want at that point in time. Get 165.
Bringing it back around. Just bringing it back around.
There we go.
All right, here's a question. Why can't Flashpoint be on land like GSL currently is? Well, let me tell you something. Korea has a 2-month quarantine when you go to Korea right now, mandatory for everybody who enters the country. They have extremely robust tracing systems for coronavirus. And so they have far fewer instances of it. And when there are instances, they can track it very quickly. So here's your answer. If we went to Korea and put everybody into a 2-week-long quarantine, which, by the way, if you
2 weeks, not 2 months, right?
2 weeks, 2 weeks, yeah.
Okay,
sorry, I misspoke. 2 weeks. So what happens if I were to go to Korea right now, where GSL is located? What happened to Wolf, for example, and Achilleos, part of the Overwatch League, when they went back to Korea recently, is if you do not have a visa or are not a Korean citizen. So for me, for example, what happens is I go into a government quarantine facility for 2 weeks where I pay them $100 a night for 2 weeks. They feed me. I can't go outside my hotel room, and then they release me into Korea. Okay. So we could do that, I guess, if we wanted to put like hundreds of people through that process, which I don't think we do. But that's why
I'm also not doing it because I've seen too many episodes of the X-Files, so I'm never doing any of that stuff for a start off. So you can go ahead and knock that off the list.
So that's why Korea can have lands, guys. That's why Korea can have lands. Now,
yeah,
for Flashpoint,
could you do it in Los Angeles? Like that's the thing. And what isn't Los Angeles locking down again?
That I haven't seen.
You can't get visas to go anywhere, so it doesn't matter for
well, you can because you're an American citizen. August. You can.
Yeah.
You can come back. You can come back home to the waiting arms and nestle yourself in the bosom of the U.S. of A. But
yeah, definitely not California. Okay, got
it. But Thorin and Anders, you are not allowed. So we are discussing options for what that means for Flashpoint 2. There are many things that could mean. Probably going to Korea to have it on land is not one of them. I don't think that's going to be a likely outcome, guys.
Well, isn't everybody in Serbia right now?
I don't know.
Like that's,
complexity.
That's a hot spot. Like complexity are there. Phase. I mean, there's a few, and I think a few other players are just boot camping over there because I think Serbia opened up again. So like,
it's also because
if we wanted to go for a stretch, boys.
It's also because Serbia is a good place for CS:GO teams to boot camp because it doesn't count if you're not from the EU. It doesn't count on your tourist visa or whatever to be there in Serbia. But you can still scrim with EU teams. Serbia is a nice place to be, etc.
Does the CSPPA have jurisdiction in Serbia? Do we know that? Can they get
Listen,
us there?
far be it from me to speak on legal matters, which I'm not versed in. I will just say one thing I've been learning the last year is don't do any business in the country of Denmark. Only do business outside of Denmark.
Let's see here.
Yeah, G2 were in Serbia. That's right. G2 were there too. That's right. Thank you, Vorian.
Here's a great question for you guys. In similar fashion to pro players, how do casters feel about and handle the burnout? Because prior to this year, many of you full-time CSGO casters, mostly talking to Semmler and Anders historically, considering Thorin hasn't run the entire circuit.
I have, but a few years back.
All right, fair enough. But you guys were on the road for like 200 plus days a year a lot of the time, which is crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think what I realized was that it was. I think part of the burnout for me was just the sort of feeling that, I was putting all my eggs into one basket, which you're taught even as a kid you shouldn't do, but I was doing exactly that thing. Which is, casting. I realized, I don't have a YouTube channel. I'm not building anything else. Like, I'm just known for this one thing. So I sort of have to keep saying yes to that. That's a lot more stress. Like, even if you can, obviously it'd be way more stressful if suddenly you couldn't say yes to anything, but it still felt sort of stressful. So I went and started, a software company instead, and I realized that causes way more burnout. And then I had got nowhere. So I'm not handling the burnout at all. But so I don't know what the answer is. Like, I think I try and take social media and Reddit like way less seriously. I think that's a huge part of it. I don't read it that much, and mostly I just read it for the memes and try and create my own memes. But I don't know. I don't think I'm specifically like particularly good at it. I think it helped when I fixed my diet and did more exercising. Like that definitely helped a lot. But I don't know. Like, I think I'm sort of a moron when it comes to these things. Like I said, I just went and started another company on top of doing these things. So now I just found myself doing like 2.5 jobs while traveling, like being on phone calls in Europe while I was doing events in America. Like, I don't know. I'm not an expert. You shouldn't look to me to figure this out at all. But diet and exercise is always a good answer.
You've just got the Goggins or like the Cameron Haynes kind of approach where it's just like, just do more work.
Do it. Do more.
The answer is just do more.
Possibly, yes. I don't like. I really don't know. I have moments in my life where I feel like I'm handling it fine, where it's great, and I think it's great. And then I have moments where I'm like, this is just awful. I should quit everything. Like, I don't know. I think it's. I got into meditation. I think that is super helpful. More people should look into that. But they're all just like little tools. I don't know. Maybe it's unrealistic to assume that you could get to a point in your life. Like, actually, that's maybe more than anything, that's the thing that I'm starting to wonder now is like, maybe what's actually wrong is my expectation that there could be a point in my life in the future where it's all just like super serene. There's no like real ups. It's all just like very peaceful and calm. It's like, maybe that's the problem, that I just have like that, like I wish I could get there, and then maybe that's not even possible. So maybe, yeah, I'm actually thinking a lot about it.
I mean, I think too, one thing that the CSPPA and then also events like Flashpoint and Blast and EPL are all trying to address is, while the travel is still involved, having longer events allows you to kind of stay in one place, maybe not be in a hotel room, but be in an Airbnb, which is way better if you're trying to cook for yourself or live some sort of healthy lifestyle. Where you could potentially bring your family, because I know, for example, for you, Anders, that was part of your plan with Flashpoint before the pandemic hit, where if you can bring your family along with you, whether you're a player or a caster, it makes a really, really big difference in your quality of life and, your ability to maintain this lifestyle. So I think part of it is not necessarily, it's the kind of travel that you're doing, not necessarily just the fact that you're traveling overall, that could really help a lot with the burnout. What are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I mean,
that's
just
exactly it,
specifically on that point, like that, I think was actually one of my requirements for doing sort of the first thing I said before we got to discussing rates or anything else like that. I just said, like, I can't actually even have this conversation to do like 5 or 6 weeks or whatever it is in LA without, us first getting to this first point. And And I mean that. So that was, first of all, that meant a lot to me that was accepted. And I think in other industries that might be more commonplace.
Well, it should be common in our industry, in my opinion.
it probably should be, but I mean, we don't have to rewind the time back so far where, the common expectation was actually, if you want I mean, people said this to both Semmler and I in the beginning, said, hey, if you want to work as a Counter-Strike caster in, 13, 14, you have to move either to Stockholm or Cologne, and maybe London, maybe, but you have to move to a place where there's a studio, and you have to live next to the studio, or you're not going to do any work. That was just assumed. And I thought about it. I even thought about uprooting my whole life to do that. So I mean, yeah,
I was kind of involved with that too. I was putting
fair, yeah, but I mean,
on you.
but that was
Stockholm.
and everyone said that though. Like that was crazy.
I mean,
right?
to be fair though, that is
DreamHack
important.
Or ESL. You either worked with DreamHack or ESL at the time. So you were either in Cologne working with ESL, or you were in Stockholm working with DreamHack, and that was pretty much the long and short of it. There was fuck all going over on in North America apart from MLG and NASL, and those guys were primarily StarCraft 2, Halo, stuff like that. So it wasn't anything that we were involved with. The whole focus had to be moved to Europe, because Europe is where it's at right now for esports. Then obviously budgets blew up in NA, and the thing completely changed. But at least at the beginning, 11, 12, those years, it's like you had to be in Europe, and you had to sacrifice. You had to be there.
Yeah.
But in case people are confused, by the way, because I know people understand now with the way invites work for teams as to why teams can't just say indiscriminately, oh, we're just taking this event off. Like you might have already agreed to. Also, it might mean that because you don't attend enough events, we talked about with the HLTV ranking, your ranking will go down, therefore you won't get invites to the next event. There's a caster equivalent of that, and it goes like this. Yeah. It's actually worse for casters, because here's the thing, right? If I'm the number one team in the world in CS, they have to invite me to the tournament. It doesn't matter if they want to or not. There is no such metric in Counter-Strike where you can be the best in the world and definitely get invited to this next tournament. In fact, they can even say, I'm going to choose not to use you. I prefer this guy. And by the way, in doing so, I'm also going to ensure you won't be number one, because you're not going to do my whole circuit, which might have $1 million at the end or a bazillion circuit points along the way, So one of the problems that casters face is when you say to the person, I can't do insert a random stop, let's say a stop in Sydney or one in Brazil, wherever you're from, right? It's one where for you, it's like, that's a bit too far for me. Like, I'd rather pick not to do this. Every TO, no matter how they see the landscape, treats their circuit like it's the number one circuit in the world. And you would be shocked, guys. Maybe you wouldn't if you start to see what some of these people are like. But if you knew how many of the people who hire the talent, literally, even if you politely say to them, look, I can't attend this event. Like, I'm afraid my schedule's just gotten too cluttered. I have something before and after it. I'll just say no for this one, but I hope to work with you again. You would be shocked how many of them close that email, and then a little like demon in their brain goes, fuck this guy anytime you get a chance, and they'll just do it. They won't hire to the next event, or if they hired whoever was like close to you in the caster rankings, they'll just go with that guy, and they'll never let you know that as far as they're concerned, you betrayed them. As all like, by the way, notice how what they're doing, guys, is treating you like you owe them something and you have some big relationship you've built, while at the same time wanting to also treat you like you're just a suite in the pick and mix aisle that they can pick from anytime they choose and not pick anytime, and they have no commitment to you at all. So unfortunately, like, believe it or not, it's actually the petty personal relationships that make it very hard to skip some of these events. So that's why, if you notice, these guys didn't say like, well, I would skip this event early in the year and then this one. That's not even an option in certain cases. So right now it's dealing with the stress. It's like the other end of it, like you say, like work out, do your exercise. It's how to deal with it once it's accumulated, I think.
This is by design. This was intentionally set up by the tournament organizers at the beginning of CS:GO when CS:GO started blowing up. I had TOs literally telling me to my face, we are never letting another Artosis and Tasteless happen again. And so they will do everything they can to put the casters against one another, to destabilize, to divide and conquer, and to not allow casters to centralize power so that they have more leverage. The whole thing is just leverage and making sure that you do not get enough of a say in things to be able to start making demands on them or pushing the boundaries. Anders and I, we hit the ground running very early and very hard at the beginning to raise standards, because you know damn well that the TOs were pushing back hard at every step. They were trying to limit, because they knew that if they gave in, then it would be a little bit more, and then it'd be a little bit more, which is just the game. That's how it's played. Yeah, but they were very clear from the beginning, where it's like, we're not doing anything to help you, and we're in fact going to do as much as we can to, to slow you down, because we can't let the casters get that kind of power again, the kind of power that Tasteless and Artosis had in their prime.
It's It is a short-sighted strategy, though, and it's not the strategy that we engage in Flashpoint, as everyone
No,
here
we're talking about 5 years ago, 6 years
well,
ago.
no.
Like,
I mean, still, like, I think that attitude of pitting talent against each other or trying to play them off each other or minimize their control is still definitely at play for many tournament organizers and many developers. The thing, though, is that what we're trying to do with Flashpoint is, instead of taking away the power from the casters, the kind of casters we want are the ones who are going to add and contribute creatively to the broadcast itself with the content. Like, if anything, we want to enable people. That's the whole thing. We want to enable casters to get their vision into the show. We want to give them more power. We want to integrate them more into the broadcast as much as we possibly can.
I would even say, going forwards, I hope that's one of the ways that some of the people who work with us actually will be able to then say no to certain events, is that they'll have, like, my hope would be they don't just do Flashpoint 1, Flashpoint 2, Flashpoint whatever number. They also, between the seasons, we can give them some kind of like a content gig or something that they appear on, or they work with a sponsor during the off-season. In my opinion, like you're saying, Monty, basically what we're going to do that the TOs didn't is we are trying to commit to certain key talent members. And as long as the relationship is able to grow and the loyalty is strengthened over time, why not set them up with all the other things that work throughout B-Site and Flashpoint?
And what you will see, I think, from us as well, is that it's not necessarily about going after the biggest names out there. What we want are the biggest contributors to broader than just casting. Like, I don't particularly have a great interest in working with a large number of people who are just purely focused on showing up, doing the casting for that day, and going home. Like, that's not what it's about. It's about being a team and working on the creative process collaboratively. And I think that is where we really differentiate ourselves from other operators.
Hey, I just want to point out. So one huge benefit that would come if this version of the ecosystem actually, if it even moves in that direction more, or if it gets there totally, like you guys were just talking about, would be that maybe especially the analysts, but certainly casters as well. Like, this is sort of my permanent guilty conscience, is that you wouldn't believe how many tournaments I show up to, and the best that I can do in terms of like studying is like just sort of look at the recent, performances on HL to be like who beat who, with how much score. Whereas, like, obviously what I would really want is to have like some kind of an in-depth understanding of how this team actually plays on a specific map, like down to the point where I could tell you, like, yeah, but on Overpass they like playing aggressively early on, but I've noticed if that doesn't work out, they tend to default into this strategy. Like, I want to know all these things so that when I do the casting for everyone, I can actually, like, I can at least lead it in the right direction. I can sort of see it coming. Similarly, like, to the, if you're watching a StarCraft 2 cast, right, you'd expect for the casters to know, many different build orders and to be able to sort of talk you through them and say if this was a good idea and, might not be winning. Like, that's one of the great things about StarCraft casting that I personally love a lot. And the problem is, like, so much of the time, because we're working so many different products, it just doesn't happen. And I think actually that just suffers from all TOs. Like, all TOs suffers from this now, which sucks.
All right, let's answer some other questions. People are saying we aren't answering questions from the chat. These are questions from the chat, guys. People are asking about...
You even just answered that completely worthless question from the chat, so keep going.
NA MDL players, they're saying the talent pool is dwindling rapidly. Players are leaving. A lot of this is probably due to Valorant, because orgs aren't paying what they need to have them go full time. So, do you guys have any thoughts on the NA talent pool right now? I mean,
am I missing something? Like, where is this perception that there's going to be 70 NA Valorant pros that are all going to be full-time salaried? Like, you'd need an Overwatch League for that to even exist. Like, the weirdest thing about this to me is, look at the names that have gone over. The huge names, like people like Brax, etc. They were already massive names. Like, people like that, Hiko. If anything, here's all you need to know, NA pros who are an MDL who have a future in CS. You're out of your mind if you're leaving to the game where Hiko, who is completely washed up in CS, just got your job. He just got the big contract that you aren't going to get in Valorant because you're nobody in either game. So why not take what you currently have in this game and see if it can go somewhere instead of going over to a game where you're still nobody, there isn't an esport yet, and there aren't even the spots to give you the things. Because the weirdest thing to me is, I guarantee, you've already seen it with a couple of names, Swole Patrol, the obvious example. Mark your calendars. In 6 months, we will see a reverse exodus. The difference is the Hebrews didn't go back to Egypt, knock on the door and go, there was nothing out there. It was all wilderness and that. Come back in. And you got like another project for us to work on. You know what great job we did with that Sphinx? Like, they don't do that, do they? Like, but you're going to see that. So that whole exodus thing isn't even going to be applicable anymore.
I also think that in general, there's very low risk currently for the tier 2 and tier 3 Counter-Strike players to go attempt Valorant and like, you know, why not? Go make some money, guys. Like, go have a great time. Try it out. Do your thing. But they can always come back. It's not like, you know, their CSGO skills are going to suddenly atrophy. So whatever. Like, have fun.
Plus, if you're an MDL team, you could be in Flashpoint. Just win that qualifier.
Yeah, you can. Just win a qualifier. You know,
There you
just
go.
opening up more opportunities. Monty, can you confirm LCK
Oh, how
made...
that went for Orgless.
I mean, it actually went
Still got
okay for
top
them.
They did all right. They did all right. They did all right. You're right.
Can you confirm LCK made a lot of money from VOD locking? What monetizing will Flashpoint do so at least some make back some of the monthly bank on fan services outside of the main tournament? So by today's standards, LCK, when there was kind of a sort of lock on HD quality and VODs, we're talking 2012 and 2013 here, by the way. I think at the time would have been considered a lot of money. By modern standards, I don't think it would be considered. I mean, it was a decent amount of money. I'm not going to like reveal what I know about that, but let's just say pay-per-view was good for esports at the time. Will we be doing
GFL
things
back in the day, man?
Look,
Holy shit, they were making truckloads.
yes, for the time it was a lot of money. For now, it would not be considered a lot of money. What will Flashpoint be doing? Guys, we are exploring, all I can say right now is on the business end, we're exploring many opportunities to provide many different kinds of content. So obviously we're not ignoring the possibility of other ways that we can run the business, but we're not ready to announce that at the current time.
Maybe I was gonna say maybe it's worth though expanding just a little bit on how this actually is a problem for like a lot of esports, right? I was having this realization something we were casting the other day because we were doing sort of what we're doing here, but while casting Counter-Strike. And I'm not saying that we would have to sort of interact with Twitch chat all the time, but I was partly wondering how many people, because if you notice in the chat now, you know, there are some Twitch Prime people and there's some other random people, but you're not seeing like Flashpoint subscribers. And I think that, you know, people would rather go and subscribe to individual streamers because you might not feel like you're part of any kind of a Flashpoint club. And, you know, I sort of wonder, what if we actually started doing that more? Like, you know, the Flashpoint, we had you know, we were all at the bar afterwards. And, you know, like if there was a way for the chat to be involved, would people do it more? Could that be a source of revenue? Like, it's actually a real problem for esports, right? I never thought about the VOD lock. I don't know. I don't know much about that part, but it just, to me, it sounds like an interesting kind of thing. Like that, you know, maybe you could incentivize people to start to feel like they were part of a club and they could be regulars.
Sure.
You know, it's not that hard to recognize people in the chat, right?
One thing that I think was very successful about the way the Overwatch League operated on Twitch was that they had like the command center, so you could watch from individual player perspectives for Owl. You got exclusive like emotes that were animated. There was a lot that Twitch did with its relationship with Overwatch League. So you could like cheer, like they were like animated team emotes that were really cool. So I think Overwatch League did a very good job of trying to drive subscriptions to the Overwatch League Twitch channel when it was on Twitch. And, you know,
Did we ever find out how many subs, or like, did we ever find out if that was a successful thing or not? Because I never got the actual viewership that we were getting, for example, like the post-day matches. Like, I can't remember any of that.
I don't know off the top of my head either.
Yeah.
But there's also,
I mean, that was interesting.
yeah, there was exclusive content, by the way. So like at the end of the show, they would do an interview where Twitch chat could ask questions if you were subscribed to a player or to us as casters or other people. So, yeah, I think I personally think that, to what you're saying, Anders, that a lot of TOs haven't explored that as much as I think should be done.
Yeah.
Let's see here. There's been a lot of questions about Thorin. You apparently, I'm not aware of this, but you apparently at one point theorized about a tournament that wouldn't show player names or team names might be fun. I don't think we'll
I
do
think
that.
someone just asked me in like a Patreon AMA or something. It wasn't actually my idea, or maybe it was a guy. Oh, I think it was a guy on like my Patreon donated discussion. Basically, his premise was that apparently in his was in like Age of Empires or something, some like obscure game. But he said that they used to do a tournament where that was the concept. Is like everyone played under a secret name that no one knew, and then what you would do is at the end, for fun, fans could try and guess like who won the tournament, and based on the playing style, who was third, and were there any upsets. And at the end of it all, you reveal it. But like that's what makes it fun. Is the idea is like it's just the eye test is what you're getting to enjoy. You're not getting a thrill just on seeing Get Right. It's like you see how he plays in the game. So I think it's not a bad like novelty tournament idea. I don't really think it has any competitive value, but it's not bad.
It would
Like
be fun.
one-off fun idea for an off season or something. Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I could. I'm not promising anything, but I could see us on like a 1 day of phase play. Like not, there might be a universe where just for fun, we could do that for like a day of phase play where we don't announce which group is playing that day. We just say, okay, so for the first day of phase 2, we're going to have games. But the problem with that, guys, also is that we can't advertise via the teams. Like it makes it very problematic for us to even promote the event. Cause like, for example, if you're a fan of a specific team and you don't know that they're playing, you might get pissed off. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I think as a novelty tournament is probably where it lives. But it would be an interesting thing to see for sure. Do we have no current plans to get involved in Valorant? We're certainly open to Valorant and many other games in the future. LAN in Canada, considering they're still open. Guys, trust me, that we're figuring out all of our options right now. We are not ready to announce what's going on. Just like any tournament operator right now, any TO, we are looking at every possible scenario for getting as close as we can to LAN as possible. That is literally everyone in the industry's current goal.
It's also not on us. I mean, if people haven't noticed, there has yet to be an update about the major. So until anyone knows when the major is, nobody else can
or if it's happening.
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. Like Sweden is open, right? Or very, very open, much more open than the rest of the world. And some companies still here are saying, like, we got some coworker or buddies, who are their coworkers, right? And they're saying that they're already that they're not going back to the work until the beginning of the year, until like the end of the year. They may just be out of the office, let alone going to an event for a LAN.
Yeah.
So like, come on.
It's also like, there are many creative solutions being courted by much bigger organizations than us. Look at what the NBA is doing with their player bubble in Florida right now, where they basically just quarantined the entire league and cut them off from the rest of the world. That's an interesting idea, right? There's talk about shortened season or what it means for baseball. There's the NHL trying to go to Canada. Like there's all these various solutions that are being tested or being theorized by much bigger entities than us. And so, we're obviously like looking at that too. So nobody has a good answer right now. We're all trying to find it. We're not ready to announce much of anything on that point.
We were pissed about TI. Dude,
Yeah.
TI was going to be in Stockholm. That was going to be sick. Everybody was going to be here in town. Barbecues galore. We were really looking forward to that one. Kicking the pants.
Yeah, that's
To be fair, though, Semmler, if you think about the timing, would have been rough when half the talent never made it there.
Jesus. Well,
Just a fact, isn't it?
we're not going to comment on that one. If you're a caster, I hear there are some, slots if you're an up-and-coming Dota caster right now.
See, there you go. People are asking how to get into the scene.
There you go.
Opportunity abounds, apparently.
Wait
What's
for your
that quote?
opportunity.
What's that quote? If you sit by the river, you'll see the bodies of your enemies float by. If you sit long enough,
Isn't that a Chinese proverb? Or
Some sort of thing
one
like
day
that.
you hope, something like that.
hard to walk and everything. Yeah.
There you go.
This is just that day, Anders.
Yeah, apparently.
Regarding Thorin's tweet about CSPPA potentially not owning IP rights, if that is the case, why would Flashpoint enter into an agreement with the CSPPA for using them in the first place? Guys, we have all the relevant IP rights. Okay, we have them. We wouldn't. We wouldn't be like the teams wouldn't be operating, and we wouldn't be a league without the appropriate IP.
Let me just make something abundantly clear. The only actual real world tangible power the CSPPA has is if the players who are members of the CSPPA agree to collectively not play in a tournament. That is it. That is the one mechanism they have by which they can force something to happen or not happen. Otherwise, they can only politely discuss things and make requests of people, which it's up to the other person to honor. Now, bearing in mind, every possible turn where I myself privately have ever spoken to anyone from CSPPA, they have told me it is not even on the table to quit playing in any tournaments. That is not something they're considering. They didn't even think that that was even a viable strategy because they're in their world, the tournaments could just go ahead with other teams that aren't in the CSPPA. You know, there's a million ways around it. So as a result, nobody needs the CSPPA to do anything except to do things that are approved by the CSPPA. So as a result, at the moment, in the current scenario where the CSPPA does a good job and represents their players, it would be nice to be approved by the CSPPA and work with them and establish certain guidelines and agreed upon terms, etc. Not least, by the way, because if they did a really awesome job, they would themselves would be taking care of the players. Like the players in the CSPA, we could say to them, "Here's something we both agree to. Now you police your players, we'll police our TO," and it would be a better world for everyone. But basically, there isn't a reason you have to. It just looks better politically.
I think there are a lot of things CSPPA could do right now. They could create an independent ranking system that would be in the best interest of their players, like we have discussed earlier in this show. The CSPPA. Here's another one. Look, we've seen a lot of these accusations about cheating online going around recently. It's been a big topic in the Counter-Strike community. CSPPA, why don't you have an investigative force? Because I'll tell you what, Valve isn't going to do that. Why don't you actually have your own independent investigation into cheating accusations? Because at the end of the day, you guys are the ones who control player membership within your organization. Shouldn't that be part of your duties?
Can I?
Ooh, buddy, I could go on a little bit to try to explain some of my tweets from earlier on that the VAC subject, because this isn't anything new.
I've got a comment about the cheating thing, but go on, Semmler.
No, go. You can go ahead and start.
I don't know why no one's made this point, but obviously because of the work we've been doing with Skybox, I spent a fair bit of time looking at Counter-Strike demos, and whenever people go and do this, where they load up a demo in a Counter-Strike and they go and look and they say the crosshair, might behave a little bit weird and all the rest of it. I don't know why no one's made this point, but data gets lost in these demos. Like, here's the way. Like, the demo is just everything that happens on the net card of a server pressed into a file. But sometimes packages don't make it to the net card, and then they just don't exist. So here's what you have to manage.
GoTV doesn't even record some of the things that come from your client, Anders.
Also
like it interpolates some of the data.
Mm-hmm. But basically you have to imagine, if you're playing a 120 tick server, every second there's 128 updates every second of what happens to everyone, where they're looking, all that shit. So, a lot of those are going to be blank because nothing happened. Now, when that happens, CSGO has to come up with something. It can't just, show a black screen or something like that. It has to guess. Like, there's some sort of guessing algorithm that says, well, if its crosshair was here, and now it's here, and we don't know what happened in between. It's not to clear all cheaters of anything, but just to say that sometimes when people overread into these things, you have to remember there's just such a thing as data loss, and that can make things look weird. That was my only point.
By the way, to pick up on that point, though, that's one thing I think CSPA could do an amazing. Think of this Leaf incident, right? Well, I'll tell you a very ironic scenario: is that Fallen himself got wrecked by what happened to Leaf. There was the famous clip when Fallen was in SK on Cobble, where his scout literally looked like it traced up to the guy like this. Now, it turned out that was actually a GoTV bug, where, as Anders is saying, if you make like a very small movement, a small amount of time over this thing, it didn't have the data to interpolate. It didn't make it a smooth movement like it was. It just took this point, and drew a weird line between it. And it turned out for the scout, it did like a weird, like a long and up movement, which no human would do. Now, in that scenario, finding that information out from like super demo nerds basically cleared Fallen's name. Otherwise, he actually could have been like a number one suspect, a la the flushers of yesteryear. Now, I think if CSPPA could work with Valve to have some kind of like either a council that takes like fringe cases there and they can explain what goes on with the demos, or they could have them work with a programmer and try and give some updates. Even basic stuff like this could literally help their players a lot. Because right now, any player that gets screwed by this current approach where it looks dodgy, That's it. Valve's never going to help you. They're just going to sit back and go, nothing to do with me, sorry. And then it's just, you just have to have that reputation for the rest of your life that you have a dodgy clip. Whereas as Anders is saying, it might not even be a dodgy clip. It might be like a million scenarios we've seen in CS. The one that springs to my mind immediately was that one from last year. I think it was ESL New York. It was one of those events where I think it was Device and Nitro were in a 1v1 around a smoke at the A bomb site on DOS 2. And basically, from I think it was Device's POV, it looked to him like you couldn't see anything. He was looking at the edge of the smoke. And then if you looked at Nitro's POV, as he killed him from the same spot, the smoke wasn't even on the front of Nitro's screen. Like he could just see through and just directly see from Device's angle, that looked like he's cheating. Like he must be. Yeah. But if you actually saw Nitro's, it's not even vaguely cheat. So my point is, I'd love it if we could have someone, CSPA seems like the perfect body to do it, could go to Valve and make the case like, look, this is really like potentially spoiling a lot of players' careers. Can you just work with us just so we can, I gotta say, even just explain what the bugs are? That would be a start.
Sure, there is that. Yeah. I think we can nip all of that in the bud by just accepting that we have an imperfect system right now, which is VAC, but that is still the most reliable system that we have to take in all of these different factors that you guys have just described. And I'm sure there are many more that can mess with the demo or mess with somebody's interpretation of it. And as mentioned in the chat, somebody mentioned, confirmation bias. It's like if you're watching demos, how do we know that this person is somehow involved and somehow wants to see something? Like, it takes all of it out. If you, that's why, there's no coming back from VAC. It's just like, if you've been VAC'd, and Valve themselves don't reverse the VAC, because there have been false VACs, but then Valve always come back and say, oh, it was this thing that whatever, and they take it back. But if Valve let a VAC stand, so far their track record is pretty good. And that is the one thing where it's just, we can be unbiased on it. Maybe somebody looks like they're cheating, but if they don't get VAC'd, then there's no room for there to be any kind of machinations that could, any kind of power play, any kind of anything going on. And before we jump to all these conclusions, because everybody just wants the fucking drama, man. They want to mainline that shit on Twitter every night. They wake up every morning looking for the next thing to get, pissed off about. That's all they want. So maybe we can nip all of that in the bud if we just accept as a community, as we have in the past. I don't know why we're talking about this again. But during all during all of these sorts of issues, we talked about all this before, and it was just like, listen, we have to go off of VAC because that's impartial and it's the only thing we have. Can we just go back to that again?
We need like a PSA for the community. So you want to corral whore? Well, first and foremost, look both ways before crossing the road. Then you can corral whore without, I think it's a whole PSA we could do on this.
Well, I also think that in terms of enforcing certain standards, this is another thing the CSPPA can do. Like, for example, at Flashpoint, we can say what we're going to do in order to try and make sure that people are having, the most competitive online environment in our events and try and ensure that people aren't cheating. But the CSPPA can say to event organizers that these are the standards in which we think all players should be playing. Here are the checks that you should have within your operational system to try and reduce the possibility of cheating. There's another thing that the CSPPA could do. Come up with some standards, especially it's very valuable during this online only portion during this pandemic that these standards exist, and they are in the best position to kind of provide this checklist to TOs, so that everybody's in alignment. Otherwise, all the TOs kind of just have to get together and sort of agree on what's going on. And sometimes these things cost money in order to implement. So all TOs might not be willing to agree to them without the CSPPA's involvement.
Oh, yeah, and this was the other one. On Fire Dimitri, he just keeps dropping fire in the chat, but I neglected to mention that. The fact that you have multiple TOs with multiple... Remember the Simple ban? If Simple got vaxxed, that was it, right? But he was banned in ESL. Was able to compete afterwards. There you go. He served his sentence, and now he's back into it, and now we have obviously the GOAT. But like, this is why we have to go with VAC in this sort of scenario, and perhaps the CSPPA can offer obviously some support in different functions. But like, when it comes to deciding whether a player gets a play or not, we have to go off of Valve and VAC because they're impartial. They are the game developer, and that's pretty much it. They don't have a vested interest in whether a player gets a play or not. For them, it's just like whatever. He's just 1 in 1.4 concurrent million players or whatever the hell we're at right now.
So lots of stuff, guys. We do have to end. As much fun as this was, I look forward to having more of the blind spot, hopefully in Flashpoint 2, where we can all sit here together and chat about Counter-Strike and esports in general. But yes, we're over our hour already. Many of us have places to be and things to do. We will have one of these next week. I will not be on it, probably. TBD. We'll see if I can. I'm going on vacation to a cabin in the woods. And so I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether I will have enough internet, but if I do, I will be there for this hour. If I don't, we will figure out an alternative. Maybe one of you guys will do it again next week.
Hiding from the CSPPA already.
That's right.
We'll see how this goes.
It's
The new
It actually
commish.
turns out that the CSPPA own Monty's intellectual property rights. He just wasn't aware of it, and they actually won't allow him to continue on the Flashpoint Q&A, unfortunately. Until we pay them 165,000. So I'm going to see what I can come up with. I think I got a few quid down the back of the sofa, but listen, don't hold your breath, guys. It's a lot of money.
All right. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll have this in some iteration next week, and appreciate you, Anders and Semmler, joining us on this.
Thank you.